Everyone in Australia likes Brumbies, the bakery chain, which is nowhere near as famous as Baker's Delight. And I'd imagine most people find actual Brumbies, wild horses roaming Australia who, much like 90210 heartthrob Luke Perry, play by their own rules. To be a romantic idea, but the reality is that Brumbies are mammalian cane toads. They're an introduced species that does irreversible damage to Australia's environment, and as much as I don't like it, sometimes you need Arnold Schwarzenegger to helicopter drop in and say, "Oof, I got you at a bad time." I'm sorry, but spirit needs to go. I've discussed this in length with scientific experts, and these ecosystems that have been evolving in isolation for millions of years and are thus spectacularly unique have been turned by Brumbies in the span of a couple of decades into live in the Krusty Demons Roadshow pit. And although our national parks are marketed to the Japanese as simply magically, they mean it in the way that 50-year-old women who moved to Tasmania use the word.
I don't know what's more magical, the view of this cheese platter.
Not in the way Narnia is. These ecosystems can't just inexplicably regenerate. No, Narnia had an explanation. God. They haven't evolved to sustain hoofed animals like Mr. Tumnus. In Kosciuszko National Park, the topsoil has been eroded over hundreds of thousands of hectares because of Brumbies, and that's brought 27 unique species found nowhere else in the world to the brink of extinction. And look, I wish it was Mr. Tumnus who's responsible. He's the fantasy world's Benedict Arnold. He deserves to be shot and Brumbies don't. They're the surfies of the animal kingdom. Just doing what I do. Living life. But this is a 27 frog and bird genocide that is happening, so you can go to that national park maybe once in your life and say,
Ponies over there, it's lovely.
That's what the Liberals and Nationals have prioritised by approving the Kosciuszko Wild Horse Heritage Bill that has made Australia a global laughingstock. Because that is like passing.
Well, rats are an important part of the cultural heritage of Sydney. It wouldn't have been the same in the early days without them giving a couple of kids the plague. All in favour of banning rat traps around children's hospitals?
Aye. Using the guise that shooting Brumbies isn't in line with community expectations. The Liberals and the Nationals. The parties that allow live animal exports to continue unbridled. Ripped apart Labor's Native Vegetation Act that has resulted in hundreds of thousands of native animals across New South Wales being needlessly slaughtered. Completely chickened out on the greyhound racing ban purely because Ray Hadley raised his middle index finger and said,
3 words. None of that.
Refused to implement Labor's tough new laws on puppy farming where they turned dogs into those fat milking chicks in Mad Max. Yet all of a sudden the coalition cares about animal welfare. Well, just like you tell your friend when he purchases a BP sandwich on a road trip and asks if you'd like a bite. Seems a bit sus. Now I'll admit that the rich Liberals who occupy seats like Wentworth and North Sydney might approve this bill because
No, I don't want the Brumbies culled. They remind me too much of the pony I used to ride as a lad. Ignatius was his name.
But the Nationals? Particularly their failed Super Mario who's lost the ability to jump New South Wales leader John Barley-Arlo, passionately advocating the Heritage Bill because
Brumbies have cultural significance.
how?
Benja Patterson wrote a poem about them, got 3 stars out of 5 on Google, clearly his best work.
And I bet if you asked him to recite a single sentence from that poem, he'd say,
Advance Australia's fair?
Very intriguing that John Barley-Arlo is so upset about the culling of an introduced animal that holds cultural significance when he couldn't support a bill quick enough that sanctions the mass culling of a native animal that I would argue is slightly more culturally significant than a feral horse, seeing as it's on our fucking coat of arms.
Build a cull cave. You don't even know what I was about to say, Mr. Barillaro. What if I said build a cull Kiama residence?
Well, is it too late to attach that to the bill, Mr. Speaker? I'd vote for that. I'd vote the fuck out of that.
And he was right to do so, because it's not rocket science.
It's biology, the science in high school that people took who were too dumb to take physics.
The more the Brumbies breed, the more native vegetation they rip up, the more the topsoil is eroded, thus further reducing the very vegetation that's currently sustaining them, meaning not only are they bringing 27 native species to the brink of extinction, but once they do, the Brumbies will starve en masse. How stupid is John Barillaro? He thinks that none of those unique native species hold any cultural significance, but he thinks that what is essentially a macroscopic virus does. The Liberals and the Nationals are the political equivalent of going to a doctor and him telling you,
I've got AIDS. No medication needed, let it run its course.
And they claim they're concerned that shooting is cruel. I don't know about you, but if I had the choice of being shot in the head or starving to death, I'd say,
well, in the words of Vinu Malesh,
let's do it. Do it. Let's do it. But again, the profoundly hypocritical, moronic logic of John Barilla Rouge Shooter isn't exactly out of the ordinary. Look at him. He looks like Humpty Dumpty got brain damage after his big fall. What sounded the alarm bell was when I discovered that the New South Wales Liberals and Nationals could only pass this bill with the help of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, who I'm taking a wild stab in the dark here and guessing are at least open to the idea of shooting. For once, it could have actually been useful to have a niche coalition of odd hick recluses in Parliament who keep Bacon magazine in publication as Christ, one of their MPs killed an elephant. What possible objection could they have to shooting some Saddle Club dropouts in the head? Especially when National Parks officials, the entire scientific community and the Labor Party are telling them, go chick chick boom girls of democracy. Waddle forth and use this small penis syndrome for some good for once. Lock and load. Yet one of the only times where it is unequivocally morally correct to shoot things with a gun, the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party turned around and said,
No, mate. There's some things you just don't kill. And elephants are definitely not one of those things.
What? The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party approved a bill that restricts shooting. Nah, something else is going on here. Thankfully, New South Wales Labor thought as much, did a bit of digging and... Apparently, New South Wales Nationals leader John Barilaro failed to disclose a relationship between himself and a political donor who would be one of the only organisms on Earth to benefit from a Brumbies Protection Act, seeing as he belongs to a tiny group of Hills Have Eyes hillbillies that live around Kosciuszko and profit from stealing the foals of Brumbies. Well, now it at least makes sense. That would explain why John Barlialo is so sentimental for the horsies that he's willing to allow thousands of them to starve, and why his true blue cultural heritage that he so staunchly defends doesn't seem to include the 27 uniquely Australian species that will be completely wiped off the face of the earth, along with the permanent destruction of one of Australia's most iconic national parks that was the inspiration for every poem that the poet that John Barilaro shamelessly, sacrilegiously referenced in his self-enriching, intergenerational impoverishing, perfect example of the Nationals' priorities themselves. Weaseling through a special interest bill written by his wrong-turn donors who kidnap the babies of these supposed cultural icons by tying the mother to a tree, waiting for her to give birth, and then leaving her there to die of dehydration and distress. Can't think of a better way to honour our cultural icons than that. Hoping the National Park Ranger will find the mother and cut her loose before she succumbs? Well, that's not bloody likely after Johnny and his merry band of national imbeciles cut the funding to national parks, probably for a few $1,000s to enrich his own Mr. Big from Target pockets. That's what really burns about the Liberal and National swill that infest our state parliaments. The embarrassingly low price that pork-barreling prize pig swine like John Barlialo are willing to pawn off the common good for. Perfectly happy to seal the destruction of national icons, species, entire ecosystems for prices so low it would make Clint's crazy bargains blush. So when you think that state politics doesn't matter, that it's boring, that it doesn't affect you, just remember, every single time the Liberals and Nationals are elected, talentless, unrecognisable slime like John Barlialo ooze their way into positions of disproportionate, underreported power and make decisions that permanently dim the future of this country in exchange for a quick, cheap, dirty buck. Every single day.